Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for attending. Before we start, for those of you in the New York area, the Bernard Heller Museum is reopening on Thursday night. There will be a reception, 5 through 7 p.m., and 16 Jewish Art Salon members, including a few from Israel and Los Angeles and other parts of the country, are participating in this show. The show has already been up for a couple of years. But COVID shut it down, and now they added a few extra works, and we really look forward to seeing you there. About this program, thank you so much, Judith, Joseph, and Dorit Dotan for curating this excellent series. Giving it back to you.
Thank you, Yona, and thank you very much for letting us do that. Welcome to the third edition of the Jewish Art Salon Open Studios online programs. The next program will be Sunday, October 10 at noon Eastern Time. Featured artists will be Ellen Alt, Linda Altbeth, and Shoshana Brumbacher. Yeah. Today we will present Efrat Baler-Moses, Gabriella Boros, and Sandra Indig. Links to their online portfolio are in the chat. Please type your questions into the chat. We're starting with Efrat Baler-Moses. She is an Israeli-born, New York-based cross-disciplinary artist. She has a BFA in painting and sculpture from Bezalel and is a grant recipient of the Israeli Cultural Foundation. She was chosen as one of the 10 most promising Bezalel artists of the 80s. At the inauguration of the new Bezalel's campus on Mount Scopus. Efrat exhibited in over 30 group shows and 5 solo exhibitions in the US, Israel, and Germany. Efrat, bevakasha.
Toda. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for hosting this absolutely fabulous series. And I'll go straight away and share my screen. The first painting I wanted to show is a straightforward art about art representation of our theme, very dry. I did this painting, it's called Unveiled, after a controversy in the art world regarding a painting that was considered a German school 19th century painting. In 2009, they did forensic analysis, fingerprints, carbon. They lifted a fingerprint off of it and they decided this was a Leonardo da Vinci painting. So from a value of $22,000, it's now valued at $160 million. So the controversy and the upheaval, which is still going on, not everyone says that it's a Leonardo, that really intrigued me. But of course, this is, you don't need to know the backstory. This is on the face of it, just an art picture about how something is revealed or not revealed. Here you see this part is a rolled canvas. It's rolled up or rolled down, if you want to consider it that way. And beneath it, you see the process of making the art. What I loved about this is how our appreciation and how we look at art changes by some controversy or by some forensic art. The next picture speaks for itself, or actually in this case, it screams for itself. It's called Scream for Us, and or Scream for US, and the 4 also stands for the 4 tries that Munch had of his painting. Here in the middle, this is a 3-dimensional bust of a mannequin. If I go to the side view, you'll see that more. You see the Statue of Liberty, with a bit of a hope there, some light. As I said, this speaks for itself, but I also wanted to show this is because I actually detest this picture. I liked it when I did it, but through the years, I felt it was too bold, too just appropriating somebody else's art for this sake. But since the pandemic, I've become a bit more forgiving of this painting because I saw that I connect to it once again. It does something to me and other people as well. During the pandemic, I had a hard time doing my really large works that are time consuming and construction, and you have to go to the studio and whatever. And I discovered Yupo paper, which is not actually paper, it's polyurethane. 100% free. You can put anything on it. It's an amazing medium. And I brought a clipboard upstairs, sat with my family and just painted. First time in years that I've done art for art's sake, nothing to do with my mission statement, just to enjoy it. And I chose a very ordinary subject, a still life, but at the time, this is more than ordinary. This is a vaccine. This is the needle. I did a whole series of these just to enjoy doing it and enjoyed the fact that maybe in 100 years it means nothing. It meant nothing, I don't know, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and it has all this meaning right now. You see the needle and all these things, how Yupa paper lends so well to rubbing and etching and scratching inside, and you can really use it. If we're talking about ordinary banal things, this I did in 2016 during the elections, Hillary and Trump. It's called Can Become. The first one in the series, I did a few. One was called Can Be, Can Do, and the first one was called Yes We Can, which of course connects to elections. And this is an art about art picture as well, about how a painting is evolved and is made. This here is actually a can with canvas draped all over it, and it's 3-dimensional. You have some garbanzo beans, which allude to my heritage. But I actually came out from an art to art history standpoint. I was thinking Morandi, the Italian painting who during World War II obsessively and only painted bottles and vases. Art historians see it, different ways, standing for an individual, fear of reality, denial of reality, or the fact that you don't even put the war or the upheaval in front of you, it still speaks of it. So I decided to go with the tin cans to show the fear or denial of fear that I had at the time from this. Another reason that I'm showing is this, that when Dorit helped me curate the works, she thought that this was a toilet paper roll. And that actually blew my mind away, just to show you how things can become so relevant with time. It changes and it grows and it becomes something else. Back to the Yupa paper, I did a lot of sabras, the menacing thorns, the beauty, and it kind of conveys how I felt at the time. Did a lot of thistles, a very undervalued plant. People overlook it. I find it a beautiful plant, and I love the scratching that you can do with the Yupa paper and all the techniques you can use with it. Here I took the pomegranates, specifically because of its a connection to Judaism, hope, plentiful, but also because in Hebrew, rimon means hand grenade as well, which is also, by the way, the etymology in English. It comes from pomegranates. So I like that play of hand grenade. Weekend in the country, I did because my husband and I, during the pandemic and the lockdown, did a lot of elaborate picnics in the car. We wanted to run away from the city. We wanted to, as though run away, but we never did run away because this crazy elaborate picnic in the car always kept the city and what's going on in our thoughts. So the city skyline and this menacing meadow going into our head is part of that. So this Yupa paper was actually the real breakthrough for me that the pandemic caused, because I haven't done arts for art's sake for years. I always were concentrated on my mission statement or the things I wanted to do. And this opened something that I don't think otherwise would have opened, just, passing the time and between downtown doing the art. This I do during the elections right now. It's called the writing on the wall. Art about art in a way, if you don't know the backstory. What you see is it's 3-dimensional because it's a panel, and on it is the hand of a mannequin wrapped with canvas, a real brush running down on a wire that is connected to a very loose canvas. My two intentions here to begin with was just to show my fear and how I felt condemned, or we may be condemned. And this is, of course, the sign of a condemned building. And this is the hand of the artist or the creator. But when I exhibit this or showed this, people had wild interpretations, which I'm asking myself, I didn't have this in my my back in the conscience, because people saw it as prophetic. They saw the blue X as a vote for the Democrats, the red as Republican. So that was, you know, the rebirth of this with other people's interpretation was very, very interesting to me. This is called Don't Look Down. Don't look down on people, don't look down as a warning. It's it's three-dimensional hanging relief. It's 3 wood panels, and these are 2 cloth mannequin heads attached like trophies, looking down in different angles. And in the middle this is canvas, gessoed and knotted, and all these colors that make the flesh on both sides are distributed between the 2. My social activism piece, I usually don't deal with these things that much, but it was such a loaded time, you know, Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, etc. And my last work, this is more indicative of what I usually do. This is 6 feet tall. It's a standing sculptural painting. I do paintings that you walk around in like sculptures. On the front here, you see a peopleless New York skyline, and you see the spikes of Lady Liberty, her crown. At the bottom here is the shackles from Lady Liberty's feet. The real shackles are broken to show emancipation. I left these unbroken. This is canvases that are made from, make a box so they can stand on. And if you can see in the seam here, there's something coming out. We'll see soon what it is. But this signified to me, or showed, I wanted to show how I felt during this lockdown pandemic, how New York changed, how frightened it was, what our future will be, and how eerie it was. When you walk around the painting, you can see from the other side that there is a mannequin. This is a cloth mannequin. It's standing in the stance of Lady Liberty with no torch, no crown, and the tablet is empty. It doesn't say 4th of July. Kind of a little bit of art about art with this, like as though the city and the oil of the oil color is seeping through the canvas in the color of the drapes, and you can see the construction of the painting. Oops, I closed my thing. But that was my hopeful side. The side you just saw, I considered the hopeful side that if we stand up and hold up to our values and fundamentals that America was built in, the city, the slaves of New York will not be slaves anymore. So that was my presentation. Thank you. And if you have any questions, love to hear them or comments.
Thank you so much. That was fun. That was beautiful. And there is now time for a few minutes for questions, and then we can continue later with questions. People want to know about the paper name I see on the chat. But before you answer that, first of all, I want to say that there is one mannequin at the beginning. I think it was a painting about a mannequin that looks like Edward Monk, like a screen, and I wanted to know what's inspired you about doing that. And my second thing that I just want to have a note, saying a note, the curatorial note about the subways that you showed. I just want to say that this was like, for me, this was like the Regenesis opposite of this vaccine and the injection. I don't know how you said it, the one that the shot itself. And I thought this is the Regenesis. It takes us back to the ancient fruit of the subways, the hardness of the Israelis' land, and you know, it's for me it was the connection. So please talk about your paper. People want to know, and there are more on the chat.
Do you want me to talk about it now or later?
Yeah, go ahead.
So first of all, UPO paper, it's YUPO. It's not really paper. It's made of 100% polyurethane. I would advise you to experiment. A lot of people do DIY with it with inks, but I didn't even know what it's used for. And you can put anything on it, oils, acrylics, you can rub it off. It's non-porous. Things just have to dry And that's what it is. It's not paper, very durable. You can't even cut it, very hard. And this one, of course, was done following 9/11. It was a devastating time for all of us. And I called it Scream for Us or Scream for US. And this is one of the most notable or known paintings in the world, probably, and everyone knows what it is. And usually when I do art about art, it doesn't really matter to me if people know the background, but I knew that people will know what this is. And it talks about mental health, it talks about devastation, etc. So I lent it, but I felt later a bit that it was irreverent of me to use it, and it's used so much, it's a bit gimmicky. So that's why I really hide this picture and don't like it. But again, I'm a bit more connecting to it now. And I know that other people have like, you know, oh my God, it's like right now, this is what's happening as well. And then those are the two that you asked about. And regard the Sabras, yes, I completely agree. And also I use all those other images that we talked about, the thistles, which is very much my Jerusalem upbringing. I used to collect thistles, I love them. The garbanzo beans in the cans, also a bit of my Israeli background or a hint of it. I use those things as well. Yeah, you can see the garbanzo beans and here.
Okay, so if anybody else have a question for Efrat, this is the time now.
Oh, I see somebody said, when did I move to New York? 1993, many years here. But my father was American. We worked for the Keren Kayemet in Winnipeg and Boston, where he's from. So I'm from all over. But almost half my life is going to be now already in New York.
Any other questions for Efrat? I think we'll move on to our next presenter. Efrat, thank you. That was a fantastic presentation, and really love the three-dimensional effects that you are using. They're so creative, and I understand what you said about repurposing a famous piece, but I feel like you made it something new and interesting in a new way. So I applaud that. Our next presenter is Gabriella Boros.
I loved your help, and everyone. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Our next presenter is Gabriella Boros. She was born in Israel and immigrated to the US as a child. Her work is shown nationally and internationally, including the International Printmaking Biennial in Douro, Portugal. Currently focusing on woodblock prints, Gabriella also paints and draws. Solo exhibitions include Northwestern University's Dittmar Gallery and Gallery Allergy in Stockholm. She has had several artist residencies and received an Illinois Arts Council grant. Gabriella, would you like to share your screen, please, and go ahead.
The lockdown of COVID happened immediately after the sudden death of my dear mother. In an effort to find some balance, I was walking 3.5 to 4 miles daily in a forest nearby. And I noticed that these beautiful, healthy trees were suddenly felled and splintered. And either it was because other trees fell on them or weather pushed them over, but it really resonated with my own mother's sudden death, which I felt was at her peak. And so I started to think about this and think about how these trees, although they were splintered, they still had this element of life. There was a spirit in them. And just as I felt that my mother's own spirit was still near me, was still with me. So this is the third of the prints, shows how the spirit slowly sinks into the roots and how the roots start to take on a life of their own, just as I felt like her soul was sinking into my soul and into those around me. And the last print of the series shows how her soul thrives in me, continues to live in me, and how with these trees too, sometimes a shoot or a seed can create an entirely new living plant. Regeneration, Regenesis, it really fits in with your theme. Mm-hmm. This series completely sparked the next series, which is The Rage of the Matriarchs. I was absolutely so so stuck in this COVID lockdown. I really was enraged by all this kind of limitations. And it really connected to me to think about rage being this female, old female emotional element that goes back to our matriarchs. And I really wanted to take a deep dive into why the matriarchs were mad. Additionally, I wanted it to be something more universal. And so each of the matriarchs received this beautiful Palestinian or Middle Eastern embroidery pattern as a sky, so that it wasn't just Jewish matriarchs, it was all matriarchs, it was all women that had this. And they also, each woman also receives a native Israeli flower to represent her personality.
Gabi, what was the size of those?
The size is 17 by 26 inches, something.
Wow, yeah. Those are big.
They're big. They're relatively big. Yeah. So Sarah was married to a much older relative, Abraham. She was immediately pulled from her familiar home. She was young, and she was pulled from her home into this nomadic life. And Abraham twice lied about Sarah being his wife, being his sister instead of a wife. And once that caused her to be raped, and once it was almost a rape. So Sarah had a lot of reasons why she would be a little bit angry at Abraham. But then Abraham had a child with Hagar, and Hagar was flaunting her relationship with Abraham to Sarah, which caused Sarah, of course, to throw her out into the desert, which we don't condone, but I mean, there is rage here. And finally, Sarah does get pregnant much late in life, and she has this child, which is for her the apple of her eye. And Abraham and Isaac go off on a little something one day, and Satan, according to Midrash, appears to her, and he is really angry that Abraham was so willing to listen to God and ask for his child to be sacrificed. So Satan tells Sarah that that is what's going to happen. According to Midrash, she lets out 3 staccato cries like a shofar, and she dies. And this is right the moment, right after she's crying her rage and her frustration. She caresses her beloved anemones, and then she's going to die. The red of the Kalaniot in Israel, to me, is such a beautiful example of the rage that you can feel. It's such a wonderful explication of that. Rebecca is also very young when she marries a 40-year-old Isaac. She chooses him sight unseen. She wants to get away from her father, but ends up with this kind of somber and dreamy guy who doesn't have much communication with her. And I think maybe that's because he was almost killed by his father. It might be a little PTSD there, but whatever. She also suffers infertility for many years, and finally has a very hard pregnancy, very painful pregnancy. I believe that the 2 twins were fighting in the womb, and they came out, and they were fighting outside of the womb, and she's screaming at them right here in this moment. She's slapping Esau on the head, she's patting Jacob on the head, and she gets the cyclamen, which to me is this tenacious plant. You find it in the crags of Slaim, in the crags of these boulders in Israel, this beautiful, gentle, nodding plant, so graceful. I believe that's really Rebecca. Why is it not? There we go. Leah is full of rage. Leah was bait and switched to marriage with Jacob instead of her sister. She always felt second class. On her wedding night, her sister was laying underneath her bed and answering Jacob in order to keep up this fallacy that he was marrying the right woman. You can imagine how enraged Jacob was in the morning when he saw Leah instead of his beloved, and that carried throughout their whole wedding. However, Leah was very fertile, and so Jacob made use of that. So she was in a completely sterile, unloved relationship her whole life. She had a sister who she knew Jacob loved her, so there was all this jealousy that she felt. I think in general, she just was always felt second class, less than. Here you have their 3 boys running in the background. She's pregnant with another boy. And you have this luscious tree, very feminine tree behind her, representing, I think, her inner femininity. She gets the globe thistles, which is in July and August, is the only thing blooming in Israel. It's this dry yellow fields, and then you see this beautiful globe thistles, which are very, very prickly. I mean, I think they're just like Leah, just too thorny to handle. And next is, I don't know why it's not moving to the next slide. Oh, wow, this is crazy. I'm very sorry. I don't know how to get this to move to the next slide. Okay, sorry about that. This is Rachel, and Rachel is, of course, much beloved of Jacob, but has problems with fertility. You see the 3 women behind her, each one also very fertile, not like Rachel. I think that Jacob really didn't understand why Rachel was so sad that she wasn't able to bear him children. I think there was a bit of a miscommunication there. And of course, Rachel felt like a pawn because she was kind of traded. She was the person that was traded for. Rachel has these beautiful mandrakes below her. The root of the mandrake was thought to be a fertility aid. And so Leah's sons were bringing her mandrakes, and Rachel traded a night with Jacob for the roots of the mandrake. That's why she has those flowers. And Dinah is Leah's daughter. She was surrounded by all these boys that all these women made for Jacob. It was a very overprotective environment, I'm quite sure. Dinah was a teenager. She wanted a little bit of freedom. And so she snuck off to the village next door. She had a friend there. That friend had a brother. We don't know exactly what happened. Was it consensual? Was it not? But it ended up with her rape. And Dinah came home, her brothers found out, and they wreaked havoc on the village next door. They killed everybody, they pillaged all their goods. And in my opinion, I think Dinah went mad with rage about this, because it was her one move, only one move of freedom that she had in her story, her only agency. She gets the chatzav is a sea squill, and these flowers bloom now in August and September. They have a beautiful white glow to them, and they're often used to demark off property lines, which is very appropriate for this story. And finally, we have Tamar, and she is a woman who marries one of Judah's sons, who dies very suddenly, and then she marries another son who also dies very suddenly. Well, Tamar realizes that Judah is not going to give that 3rd son, and so she goes off, hears that Judah is going to be coming close by, and so she dresses as a prostitute, and she has an evening of lovemaking with Judah. And Judah doesn't have any money, so she takes his staff, and she takes his seal, and she takes his cord, and in payment. And Judah was going to send her the money the next day, and he sends the money over to the town, and they say, well, there's no prostitutes in our town. What are you talking about? Once Tamar is very visibly pregnant, she goes to Judith's court. She presents herself. Judith scornfully looks at her and says, "You promiscuous woman, how dare you come to me?" And Tamar shows him his staff, the cord and the seal, and quite clearly it was Judah that was the progenitor of the child, and he agrees, and he kind of has to give Tamar the matriarchy. The Tamar is the fruit. You can make syrup out of it. It's a wonderful sweet fruit. You can use the leaves, you can use the tree. So it's this very utilitarian plant, and it's very, very clever, just like Tamar. I just wanted to say that my series also deals with Shemitah in the sense that these women all were working very hard, and that the Shemitah year is this year, like this year, we're supposed to take the land and give it rest. And these women did not have rest. I believe these women had to forage instead of harvesting their crops. I believe they had to make do with whatever food they could find. And I just want to say that for us, as modern Jews, I hope we can renew this year, and I hope that we have a restoration of our freedoms and of our former life. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Gabi. The work is phenomenal, and I have to say, I've known your work a long time, and The Rage of the Matriarchs is some of my favorite of your work. I see some of the emotional tone that you had in your earlier work in your paintings, and I love the intensity of that. So kol hakavod, wonderful work. We have time for a question or two, and Ashera Cinnamon asked about this. She wanted to know the source of your midrash.
Oh, that I would have to look up.
Or what sources?
Yeah, okay. I have to look that up. I did so much research. I would have to look where that came from, but I can track it down. Okay, and then Ashera, if you want to, well, Gabi's website is in the chat, so you can reach out to her directly. Just looking for, you have a lot of positive comments. I'm just looking to see if there are any questions, mostly just appreciation. Anybody just want to jump in with a question for Gabi? Gabriella?
So Gabi, thank you. Toda rabba. It was beautiful. I love your work. Are those woodcuts, right?
Right, woodblock prints. Woodblock prints, yeah.
Will you tell a little bit about the process of how you do those?
Yes. So there's a composition that is honed, over quite a few trials. Then I take transfer paper and put it on the wood so that it's a reverse of the piece. And I use Japanese cutting tools. I use Chana plywood, which is a Japanese plywood. And then I cut the images in. And it's a relief printmaking process. I ink it, and then I print it onto Japanese paper.
Beautiful.
Any other questions for Gabriella? Well, I think
Sandra Indig, a native New Yorker, practiced as an artist, psychoanalyst. She is a contributing author in book Art, Creativity, and Psychoanalyst Perspectives from Analyst Artists. Publications include a book of her poems and paintings, Talking Colors, Seeing Words, Hearing Images. Sandra exhibited in the US and Europe and has curated many exhibits.
It's an honor and a privilege to join everyone today, the moderators and the virtual audience. I'm deeply grateful for you sharing your time with me, with us. On the left is the cover of my book, Talking Colors, and as you can see from the title, I work in different spheres of being, our words and our images And I think in the brain, some of the brains, or maybe all of our brains, which are three-dimensional, not two-dimensional, these wires, these synapses cross, and we are seeing images and words, which is very common, or hearing colors in music and so forth. So because I've worked in many different fields or disciplines, this is a culmination of a number of years of work. The poems and the images are not always produced at the same time. As I believe that we live in a circular kind of, things that occur once tend to occur again and again in different times and different places, depending on what we're surrounded with. Okay. I'm very kind of pleased that, this event occurred right after our holiday, and I was fortunate to attend a service in which the rabbi included the story, which he told very well, of overcoming diversity, of overcoming,
Adversity?
I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous for some reason. Of overcoming adversity. And he stressed the point that as long as you keep trying, and fighting to go forward and to live your life and so forth, to create hope, that, you're a winner, you're not a loser. So even if I have made many mistakes in my life, I have taken the wrong path, not the right road, but I keep going, I keep trying, and I think this is makes me a winner. I rely very much on what I have inherited. My story to me is important. The painting, Unbiblical Braided Bread, has to do really with my grandmother, who made challah for Friday night. And I have to credit her with my ability to survive as a creative person, because I've been involved with creativity and creative process all of my adult life. I've written about it, talked about it, lived with it. And this is one of the products. I want to read a few lines from the poem Unbearable Braided Bread, because I think the words and the image speak to each other. Mother and dark matter are contracting, mother, dark matter contracting, misunderstood outcasts in attics and gated communities, seek of centuries old misconceptions, mismatched, misheard, and misspoken, and not like me, are kept behind closed doors. The broken and unbearable among us once swelled with sacks of great breath and heard buglers herald the call for mothers baking early morning bread. And I made a comment in other talks that this painting is a tribute to all mothers. I don't know whether to include that now, but we can go on to the next image. No, this is wonderful, and I'm so glad you showed Fort Line Monument, because it's hard, even from the poem, to picture. This thing was like the equivalent of a skyscraper. If you can see in the background, you know, the scale, it was enormous. And although you can't see it, there are figures carved into that stone. And this was a tribute to those Jews that were exterminated, I believe, at Fort 9. And what happened was, the drawing on the left is the result. I was I've been in Kaunas, Lithuania, for a presenting conference, and we made a trip to Fort 9. My poem is called Camp 9. And I was just blown away. I was leaving for the airport in a few hours. I had acrylic with me, and I had rice paper. And I just did this whole series of paintings. And the left one, to me, reads like a diseased brain. And on the right, I see, for me, I mean, it's my interpretation, that out of this, there's hope, that out of this cancerous, diseased brain, one still has hope. One can dance and make jokes and have festivals. All right. Part of the ending of the poem reads, "There never was an exchange, a lasting treaty, or a flimsy truce. A majestic monument soaring to the heavens like a mighty eagle is not always a plea for the clouds to form and cause rain or a prayer for peace. It is not always a symbol of amends to the living or the dead. Simple act of washing hands would have sufficed." I still get the chills when I look at the monument. I don't know how many of you have visited this place, but it's horrific.
Where is Fort 9? If you mentioned it, I missed it. Sorry.
I believe it's in Yona, Lithuania. It's near Kaunas. It's a fort, literally. And they showed, you know, like under the staircases, there were cells that were built to house prisoners. They showed you the rooms in which they were kept and so forth. Yeah, I was just, it was abominable. What can I say? Many years before that, I had visited Theresienstadt and felt the same way. Anyway, I have to say, I don't know if it's appropriate here, but well, good here, but I grew, the household of my childhood was in part a traumatic childhood in a mostly toxic environment. And there was secrecy, a lot of secrecy in the house. And I absorbed, as children do, without being told, that there was a lot of fear and anxiety about something. I didn't know what it was. But eventually, my uncle returned from World War II, and I don't know how old I was, it wasn't very long. And he brought back photos of a camp he had helped liberate. And I don't know what that did to me. And later on, I don't know when it began, maybe I was 8 years old, I began to see have hallucinations of figures coming toward me that were disintegrating. As they came, this was in the dark, and I'd see these figures coming towards me. And as they were coming towards me, they would disintegrate. And this is the key trauma I feel of my life, that I have spent all of my creative life basically trying to absorb that trauma and recreating for myself a safer place. And the way I did that was thankfully through my artwork. I studied art, of course, but I never studied poetry. I never was a writing major or something like that. I consider my poetry a gift. It comes to me, it's like hieroglyphics on a page, the two-dimensional page tells my feelings in the words, and this is how I heal. I recreate, in a sense, a better life for myself and those around me. Okay, next image. Listening, I attributed to Paul Celan's Death Fugue. I don't know if any of you know it. It starts with black milk of morning.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful poem. And I want to quote Howard Stein from his book, which my black and white artwork accompanied his poems. So he said, as a beholder, he wrote, a painting speaks of absences, voids, emptiness, that for me perfectly evoke the words that evoke the painting. And I'll read a few lines from listening. Bluebird songs heard and cups of white tea gulped, anecdotes prescribed for 3 million souls and the unfound dead, evaporated before their time, are remembered by amplified flutes and lit by glistening black coals burning. People with some background in Judaica can understand, or pull out from here references to the Holocaust, 3 million souls and unfound dead evaporated before their time. Most of these that I have chosen do relate to my trying to come to terms with that horrible event. Next, please. Okay, wall of prayer. That's on the left. Again, it's a done acrylic on paper, and yeah. And this evoked for me my visit when I was in Israel to the Western Wall. I just couldn't stop crying. It was so powerful. And I read, spaces holding prayers, holding dreams of every generation. Each one building a wall of dreams, a wall of mingled prayers. And I'm talking about, of course, the prayers that we put in the cracks of the wall to be honored. We hope they reach heaven. The next one is Guests of the Sleeping Mind. This is an acrylic work done on canvas, and it's at least 60 inches in width. And it was done over time. These works take me a long time for the form to emerge from the two-dimensional surface. I don't go work with, although I do many sketches sometimes, you know, for a long time before the forms emerge, but they're not copied from anywhere. They have to emerge from the surface of the painting. This has to do with the transformation and of my mother's funeral. I'm only going to read the last paragraph. She was carried into the days of mourning. She was lifted by the arms of her seed and guided by the night vision of the ancient ones. The weavers of our days are known by eyes seeing between light and dark. They lifted their eyes into a time when there was no time, but only the warm hands of guests touching doorways of sleeping minds. Let's say, I think it's obvious when I'm saying touching doorways. Of course, I'm talking about, not of course, but I'm referring to touching the mezuzah as we enter a room, as we enter our homes, we leave them. And I like to think about the ancient ones when the gods walked our earth. Okay, we can go to the next one, please.
I think, is this the last one, Sandra? Because we're kind of getting to the end of our time.
No, I have maybe, there's one more, but I'll be quick.
Okay, because we want to give people time to comment and ask you questions.
Okay, this is Darker Side of Gray, and it's a tribute to Simon Wiesenthal. I cannot face you if you don't see my eyes. That's the first line. Last paragraph. Comment on divisiveness, division for gain, and dirty dealings centuries old. Address the question, how much is enough? And the last one is Story in the Sky, remembering the 12 sons. I read only a few lines. Who was born to envision their effervescent colored form or see into the before history of recorded time. Like so many jeweled memories, memories planted in the blood of generations. Older eyes and still older ears hear the history of the 12 and remember. This has a mythopoetic reference, and I think I'd like to end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Is the last one was acrylic as well?
No, this was done with water stick.
Thank you. This is very powerful and sad work.
Hmm?
And you can see your work is very powerful and sad as well. And you can see a lot of beautiful comments on the chat. I'd like to call Cheselyn to say something.
Yes, I just want to say, Sandra, that I so deeply appreciate your expression. I put it in the chat, but that seems to be just the most profound dynamic betwixt your destiny and fateful events. And really, the seeing words and hearing images, you do that very, very richly in your work. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question about your poetry, Sandra. I so enjoyed your words. And the book that you published, are all the poems that you read from, are they in that book?
Yes.
Yeah, that was, it's very moving.
Well, the book I think is still sold by Amazon. I'm not sure. I haven't checked in a long time. So it should be listed there. But it's on the left-hand side is the poetry and the corresponding image on the right. And there are 26 pairs of poems and images.
Karen Kassep had a good question. Do you write the poems at the same time or prior to making the visual works?
That's a great question. As I said, the memory is circular, and some of the poems happen to be like Camp 9. That was written pretty much at the same time as the event. However, many of the poems and the corresponding images were written years apart.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, they don't, the timeline is more circular than linear. And
Well, sorry.
You can ask a question, Francine. Just unmute yourself.
Oh, okay, great. It was so wonderful, so moving. I mean, incredible program, but Sandra, you're amazing. I was just wondering, at what age did you start to express yourself through your art?
my art? Yeah.
Art.
I don't remember not doing it. I just did it, you know, starting as a child with making myself figures and dressing them up with, you know, paper dolls. I didn't buy them. I made the figure and then I made clothing for them. I also, I like sculpture very much. And the early story to that is I used to take clay and I would make myself houses with secret entrances. So I incorporated my family's secretiveness because they never divulged anything. I made myself secret passages in these houses that I made out of clay. But I always did it.
We had a question about where everybody, all the three presenting artists live. So let's start with you, Sandra.
I live and work in the West Village, New York City.
Okay, and Gabriella?
Skokie, Illinois, just north of Chicago.
And Efrat?
2 months already in Long Beach, New York, moved from Brooklyn.
All right, and our people attending, I know, are from all over the country. I'm in Chicago, and there are people from California and Florida and all over. So I just want to thank our artists today for a very moving and meaningful and stimulating and inspiring presentation. It was wonderful. And I do encourage everybody to visit their website so that you can see more of the work of these wonderful artists. Our next program is October 10th. It's a Sunday morning at the same time, noon, New York time, with Ellen Alt, Linda Altabef, and Shoshana Brombacher. So Shavua Tov and Shana Tova, if we could still say that. And thank you for looking at art with us.
Chag Sameach, Chag Sukkot.
Oh yeah, We'll see you all hopefully next time. Bye, everybody.